Hi, I'm Bill, the Domestic Monk. Welcome back to another video, and thanks very much for watching. So today I want to talk a little bit about tribalism. So tribalism just seems to be a part of human nature. I mean, look at our politics today. It's just everybody's divided into their own little tribe, and everybody really, and they have very little compassion or understanding for the other people that are outside of that particular tribe or their perceived viewpoint of that tribe. And you know, it reminds me, for those who followed this channel know that I spent a career in law enforcement. So I was in law enforcement for about 26 years total. When you consider my military police experience, I had a year as an auxiliary police officer in my hometown of Massachusetts before I went out to California and had a career with the Orange County Sheriff's Department. I spent about almost 23 years there before I was ingloriously banished from the profession. But at one point, I was the chief of police services for the city of San Clemente. That's the southernmost city in Orange County. It was a great assignment, one of the best assignments I ever had. And you know, all of the contract cities had a lieutenant in charge who was the chief of police services, and then we'd get together periodically for different events throughout the year. We had deputy year awards and that kind of stuff, and usually they would be at community, you know, like the Rotary Club or something like that, and there'd be the fireman of the year and the policeman of the year, or the deputy of the year. And at those events, you know, every time police and fire get together, there was a professional rivalry there, where the police would joke about the fire and try to diminish their contribution to public safety, and the police would do the same thing to the fire. And you know, I never took part in that. I was never comfortable with that, and here's why. I remember back when I was in the academy, you know, law enforcement is an interesting profession. I mean, it's a dangerous profession, and one of the things that, you know, people used to criticize the fire is that they would stage until we got there to make things safe. Well, yeah, to make things safe from physical threats, right? And as a police officer, for me, man, you know, that's what we trained for. I mean, I was on SWAT for years. I worked narcotics, gang enforcement. I was looking for action, and we were trained to combat and eliminate physical threats, right? But I always remembered back to my academy experience. So our academy at the time was off of Catella Road in Orange, right across the riverbed from Angel Stadium, and just south of the Angel Stadium, they had a fire training center there. And one of the days in our academy, we had to go over there, and they had a fire tower in there, and they smoked that whole thing out. And they put us up in there, and you had to go in there and buddy breathe with these Scott air packs that they had. So basically, and I was with my buddy Bobby Anderson. He was a former MP like I was, and in fact, he was in Alpha 11 and I was in Bravo 11 in a military police basic academy. So he was really kind of in my senior class. Great guy. He left the department and went to Utah. That's besides the point. But we're up there doing buddy breathing, and basically you're in this smoke-filled concrete room, stifling. You can't see. It's claustrophobic, and you got to pass this Scott air pack back and forth, and you know, you can't breathe when you don't have that thing on. That gave me a very healthy respect for the fire department. And you know, while I was always I felt like if you could shoot it, stab it, or put it in handcuffs, I was good to go. But even back in the Army, when we used to do stuff like NBC training, which was nuclear, biological, and chemical training, when they were talking about nerve gas and nerve agents and all that stuff always made me queasy. I didn't want anything to do with it. And it's the same with the fire. You know, police would make fun of the fire staging until we got the area safe from a physical perspective, but they had to run in there and deal with all those noxious fumes and all that stuff. And you know, so since that time, we moved out here to Tennessee, and we're out here in rural country, and we have a volunteer fire department down the street. And through a series of events, I ended up joining the volunteer fire department. And I'll tell you, I have learned one thing. Besides SWAT, which is physically demanding, there is nothing in law enforcement that equals the physical exertion required, even in a volunteer fire department. I mean, going out we used to call them hose draggers, right? That was the big thing in law enforcement, hose draggers. You ought to try dragging a few hoses sometime before you start criticizing the firemen for dragging. It's everything they do is physical, taking things off of the truck, putting them back, testing these hoses. You got to roll out thousands of feet of hose and run the water through them, test them for pressure, and then you have to roll those things back up and carry them back onto the truck, load them up. It's hard work. And that's my point. You know, in the last week or so, the actor Shia LaBeouf converted to Catholicism. That's fantastic. Apparently he was, during his preparation for the role of playing St. Padre Pio, he was drawn to the faith and he converted. And he did an interview with Bishop Barron, and anybody who knows Catholic media knows who Bishop Barron is. And, you know, afterwards, predictably, there are members from the trad community, the traditional Catholics, those who favor the Latin Mass, very critical, almost like using it as a gotcha moment, because during the interview with Mr. LaBeouf and the bishop, he talked about, Shia LaBeouf, his experience at one of the Latin Masses and how it really spoke to him and moved him, which is great. But that doesn't discount, on the other hand, the experience that those of us who attend the Novus Ordo Mass experience. It just discounts it out of hand when you use it as a gotcha. Ha! You know, Shia LaBeouf loves the Latin Mass, right? It's not about the Latin Mass. It's not about the Novus Ordo Mass. I've talked about my experience with the Latin Mass before. You know, I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts. My dad used to take us to St. Joseph Abbey, and I've told this story before, in Spencer, Massachusetts, which was just, 15, 20 minutes away. Beautiful. They're the Trappist monks, and it was beautiful. A stone chapel, cold because it's Christmas time. Everything in there. The monks come in their hooded garments, Gregorian chant, incense. Beautiful experience. I mean, I still remember that from when I was a kid. But as an adult, when I was out in California, I was fortunate to live like 15 minutes from the mission in San Juan Capistrano, and they have an old chapel. It's old by California standards. It was one of the missions were constructed by Saint Junipero Serra, and that was one of the older ones. And they had a little side chapel that was original side chapel. The old art, the beautiful ornate altar was little, maybe held 100 people, and they'd have the Latin Mass down there every once in a while. And I went to it a few times. And also, I would go to the Abbey. The Norbertine Abbey, which was at Silverado Canyon at one time, and then they moved it out to, I forget the canyon they moved it out to. Now they have a beautiful cathedral out there now, or monastery out there now, and I was able to work, when I was on the bishop's detail, I was able to work the ordination mass. It was beautiful. But those experiences with the Latin Mass didn't speak to me the way that they do to Shia LaBeouf, obviously, and other people in the faith, and that's fine. I don't discount that Mass because of it. I'm glad we have it. But the problem is when you prefer that style of Mass and then you criticize the rest of the church. I mean, that's the way Catholics nowadays worship. Our Pope and our bishops have asked us to worship that way, to attend the Mass in the vernacular, to receive communion in the hand. And then there are others who consider themselves to be Catholic, and they look down their nose at people that are doing that, who are just following the bishop, which is what we're supposed to be doing as Catholics, following the teachings of the bishop, who are the successors of the apostles. These are the people that the Lord gave the mission to go and teach and preach in his name. And it's sad, because like the police in the fire, you don't know what's in the hearts of the men and women who attend the Novus Ordo Mass, and neither do we know what's in the hearts of those who attend the Tridentine Mass. But the important thing is that we're Catholics, and we're in the Catholic Church, and we have both of these forms available to us, and one isn't better than the other. The Eucharist, the true presence in the Eucharist is just as present in the Novus Ordo Mass as it is in a Latin Mass. And that should be what binds us together as Catholics, regardless of how you feel about the types of Mass. And look, we've all been to bad Mass experiences. We have. You know, we're in the, my entire life, I was born in 1962. That's when Vatican II officially opened up. A month after I was born is when they had the first session of Vatican II. Went on for a few years, and then they kind of rolled out this, and by all accounts, from people who lived through it, I talked to my dad about it, it was horribly rolled out. They just made these changes, didn't explain them to anybody. In some cases, I'm sure there are some cases that it was done very well. And there are occasions where the Mass is done very reverently. When I was a kid, I would go to Mass, and I remember one time, my parents made us go to Mass. They didn't attend. One time, me and my two brothers were up in the front row, and we were screwing around during the Mass. Somebody called my parents, and we got home. Goodness gracious. Let me say this, we never screwed around in Mass again after that. But the Mass, when I was a kid, was reverent. It was a Novus Ordo Mass, but it was reverent. I was an altar boy. People came in, they were silent, it was quiet. You know, we had an organ playing. We had usually one cantor that sang the songs. Very reverent. And I've had been to Mass all over the world, as I've explained, and certainly all over the United States. And there are some places that do it better than others. But it's really not about the theater of the Mass. It's about the Eucharist, the celebration, the sacraments, about we're there worshiping our Lord. That's what's important. So it's the disposition of your heart, really, that matters, not what Mass you attend, right? And that's what our goal is here. We shouldn't be promoting this faith or that faith. St. Paul talks about that in one of his letters. He talks about, you know, you say you're from Paul and I'm from Apollos and you're from Peter, but that's not it. You know, we're all Catholics. And this tribalism stuff, it's silly. And, you know, I noticed too that people, and I had this experience several years ago. I used to follow some of these traditional websites on YouTube and watch some of these guys. And I realized what happened is it made me frustrated and angry. And I really had to stop and reflect. And I find myself writing comments that were negative against other Catholics, even a couple times against Bishop Barron. And I regret that now as I look back. But, you know, I get caught up in this thing where my desire for how I feel the Mass should be should impact the church. That's not what the Mass is there for. The Mass is there for us to worship the Lord, receive the sacrament, and grow in grace and holiness. And once I went through a paradigm shift, I really just kind of stepped back and I said, this is not giving me peace. It's not giving me joy. And we know that where Jesus Christ is, there you will find peace. And we know where strife and division comes from, right? It comes from the other guy. And I had a paradigm shift at that time, one of many over the course of my faith. And that was, I'm not the Pope, and I am not one of the bishops. It's not my job to run the church. It's my job to work on myself, to be as holy as I can, to try to eliminate the vices in my life, increase virtue, make my relationships with my loved ones, my wife and my children, my friends stronger. And you know, once I pulled out of that mindset and really started focusing on those things, the love for the Catholic Church, regardless of which Mass I attend, my whole attitude changed. And I really find peace and joy in being Catholic. I love the Catholic faith. I love defending it. You know, I'm a cradle Catholic my entire life. I've been, you know, sometimes warmer, sometimes cooler, but I've always been Catholic. I've never felt the call to go to another spiritual community. And you know, that's all God's grace. So, but when I was focused on what I wanted the church to be, it just made me frustrated. And now that I'm focused on how I should be, what I should be doing to improve my life, my own personal walk to holiness, I realize I got a big enough job on my hands with that without trying to change the church. Now imagine being Pope Francis or any of the bishops and trying to steer this big ship in the wake of Vatican II, when one side's attacking you for this and the other side's attacking you for that. If we as Catholics just decided it's good enough to be Catholic and just to focus on our own individual holiness, I think the church and the world would be in a much better shape. Because right now, I think the devil's just rubbing his hands with glee. He's got Catholics acting like Protestants, protesting their own church and feeling that they were entitled to do so. That this self-righteousness that they feel is legitimate, and it isn't. We're supposed to be reaching out in charity to everybody. And if we can't even be charitable to our own bishops and our own pope and our own Catholic brothers, how are we going to be charitable to anybody else? So, that's my message for today. I hope all of us would just stop this bickering and be happy for people like Shia LaBeouf who come into the faith. And I'm not criticizing him. He wasn't critical of the Novus Ordo Mass, other than his experiences like all of us. He's been to some, he called them guitar playing masses, as we all have. And, that's not my bag. But I'm trying to put myself in the back seat on that and understand what we're there for. It is to be there to worship our Lord, receive his grace, and grow in holiness. And that's what it's all about. So thanks very much for watching. And as always, Siempre Adelante.